Let me open the debate for our viewers now. Swachh politics, is it long due or much overdue is the big question that we are asking. Let me take this across to my guests who will be joining me now on the broadcast. Tom Varadkar of the BJP joins me. Also, Dr. Anshul Avijit, spokesperson of the Congress Party, is with me on the broadcast. Prateek Som, JJP national spokesperson, also joins me. And Smita Prakash, editor ANI, is with us on the broadcast. Let me take this first to the BJP and the Congress Party first. Of course, these proposals have been put forth to the national and the state parties, sir. I'll take this across to Mr. Varadkar first. What do you see the changes to be like? What are your views? Because your views have been sought.
Well, the proposals have come from the Election Commission. The government, after due consideration, has sent the proposals back with their evaluation of it. Now, the ball is in the Election Commission. There are issues for NRI rights to vote, online voting, criminalization, the pending cases, as you mentioned,
yes.
484 cases pending in 2021. And, well, it continues till the cows come home. And then you have criminals all over the place, across the party line. Then there is this issue about party funding, and then the issues of paid news. You have an election going somewhere, you have take the money from another state, advertise in some other state. I mean, all this is questionable. The taxpayer is liable to get answers for it, you know. If I'm spending money, I collect money from Punjab, I need to pay back or do constructive work in Punjab, not have advertisements in the state of Gujarat. I mean, I'm just giving you a case.
Yeah.
Now, these kind of activities are all, and then of course the great issue about exit poll and what have you. They tend to have a tendency, there is no punishment, you need to get into the fact of what kind of process has been followed or whether this is a sponsored category. Because I've heard many politicians say, well, you know, this is basically part of our campaign money. We keep money ready for exit polls and other things to influence people. And these kind of charges fly across the board. So I think it is one of the biggest steps that this government, under the leadership of Modi ji, is coming out with the decision to take reforms and take it by the collar. You see, this is required and this will purify the system. There has to be a consensus, will be a consensus, there will be a consultation process, and I'm sure all of us will agree that more transparency, more the better.
Okay. So, Anshul, why is the opposition crying foul? Don't you think these reforms were much needed for that level playing field, for that election reform that has been much talked about? In fact, in the parliament as well, in 2019, this debate was unanimous.
Exactly my point. I mean, this debate should come about in parliament. Which is the legislative body that is supposed to decide about electoral reforms. The Election Commission is clearly exceeding its brief. Its brief is to conduct fair and popular elections, to basically administer in a bureaucratic way the election process, to recognize parties. It is not to tell which political party is going to make which kind of freebie or welfare scheme and what is the validity of that particular scheme. It is not qualitative advice that the Election Commission is here for. And the problem is...
But the Election Commission has said that. We have to give them their due. They wanted to stay away from that sort of committee of panels and they requested the court for it. So they have stayed away. So that is one point. Yeah.
Well, why haven't they? No, my point is, the problem is that the powers of the Election Commission is supposed to be an independent body. The Election Commission has, with this government has been completely emasculated, right? Or it's been robbed of all its independence and authority. And we've seen that repeatedly in the way the elections are held. Last year, in the midst of the pandemic, if you remember, there was an 8-phase election. I mean, we were crying to listen, stop this because you're spreading it. So it's been, so now what has happened is that it's become an arm of the government, right? So we think that, the government and the Election Commission are cahoots in devising what is a kind of an electoral scheme or electoral reform in which there will be no consultative process. The word consultation that was repeatedly used by the law minister is a bogey. But if you remember some time back, the electoral bond scheme was initiated. It was, we need, reforms as far as electoral funding is concerned. But you know what the electoral bond scheme was? It was a highly duplicitous, fraudulent scheme in which there was no consultation. In fact, there was a noting in the law ministry saying that how illegal and unconstitutional it was. The RBI expressed its displeasure over the electoral bond scheme, yet it was passed very hurriedly because the government suggested it such. And we now know what is the nature of that scheme. The government knows who is funding which party, and then it can go after those kind of detractors. So we are highly suspicious of what the government does, and therefore...
Okay, I can see Mr. Varakan raising his hand, so I'll let him have his point, and then I'll come to my other guest. Yes, Mr. Varakan.
Mr. Anshul Avijit is the son of Meera Kumar and the grandson of Jagjeevan Ram. When he talks about the allocation,
my family history, sir.
Yes. I am putting that on
very
the
nice. Yeah,
Mr. Varakan, please make your point.
Nothing negative.
Yeah.
I have just
no, absolutely not. I'm wondering why you're invoking that when I'm here in a capacity to...
The institution of election commission, you need to watch your words. It was Dr. Manmohan Singh who wanted maximum reforms. Mr. Anshul, you were not in politics at that time. It was the
Mr.
Congress
Varakan,
party
don't patronize me.
Let me first make his point. Let him first make his point,
I am
Anshul.
suggesting to you that it is the parliament that decides, not a body that exceeding its brief.
Oh, it is not exceeding its brief. If the election commission does not bring reform, who will bring reforms, Mr. Anshul?
So you are saying, Mr. Varakan, it should not be discussed in the parliament?
The parliament amended when the voting age was brought down, and you remember that.
One at a time,
an
please.
amendment of the parliament that brought it down. That was one of the biggest electoral reforms that happened.
Anshul and Mr. Varakan, if you talk over one another, the viewers would not be able to hear you. Mr. Varakan, please complete your point. Anshul, I'll come to you.
Parliament is the temple of democracy. Every discussion will be held there.
I think the BJP constantly needs to be reminded of that.
Please, let him make his point.
This is the standard operating procedure of the Congress party. When we want a subject to be discussed,
you were in
other
it.
Political parties who want to discuss.
All right. Smita, let me take this to Ms. Smita Prakash. Smita, we were talking about paid news, and it has been... All right.
Apart from
okay, Anshul, I'll come to you. Let me ask my question to Smita, please. Anshul, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We were talking about paid news. That was one aspect that has been raised quite a lot. The fact that there has been a growing chorus to actually create legal options to go ahead and counter fake news. That is something that has been much talked about. Do you think this is a step in the right direction? Because, of course, there has been this talk about how news is associated and paid, and, of course, a certain sort of, a statement is projected in the media and also in social media, which, of course, has been branded many things. The cons of social media has been always put forth.
Look, I think firstly about this whole debate that happened between the two spokespersons about the election commission. I just listened to it. I think the irony is that the election commission is pilloried abroad and it's pilloried in India and praised abroad. The election commission of India. It doesn't matter which party is in power. That's just aside to what the spokespersons were saying. About your question about about the media and about fake news. Now the election commission is supposedly given this whole bunch of proposals. There are 70 or 80 proposals, and fake news is one of them. I think there are many things that needs to be looked into as far as our elections are concerned, and of course news is part of that. And the most important part is the funding thing, because it's so opaque in our country. Political parties and politicians have found a way around the rules which already exist. They are spending thousands of times more than what they admit. And forget about electoral bonds and payment by check and all that. Those mountains of cash that we have all seen in the homes of politicians. So if each of them comes on our television screens and screams about us being fake news, excuse me, but the for saying this, you may think I'm impolite, but I am factual in saying that you need to look at yourselves. I need to say this to politicians. So, when these raids are happening, the voters are determining for themselves. I'm sure that, these political parties which claim that they are holier than thou and the election commission is to be blamed, all the state institutions are to be blamed. No, it's you people too. The mountains of cash are being found in politicians also.
But here I'm also talking about how the use of media has been done to the advantage of, let's say, a certain political party to set a certain narrative. And it could be social media also. I'm including that entire aspect also, because in this very parliament, social media has been called a cheat India platform as well. That is what also has come out during the course of these many discussions when it comes to electoral reforms.
Right. So, okay, fine. If I for a moment say that, okay, social media as well as traditional media, television, newspapers, magazines, every aspect of media, it needs to look at itself. When I go into the sphere of fake news and cracking down on the media, once that crackdown happens, that door you open up. If there is self-regulation, I am all for self-regulation. And I agree that there are mistakes that are made. There is fake news, rampant fake news which happens on social media, not so much in traditional media. I'm going to say this again, not so much in traditional media, because we all comply by rules and regulations which are laid down for us. And those of us who don't do it, we either our advertising gets stuck, or we are hauled up by FIRs, we are taken to court. There is all kinds of things that are there already. Self-regulation is what I'm always for, because you open the door for governments to start regulating, and you will be, rest assured, all of us, there will be a crackdown on our freedoms. You want that? I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Let me bring in Mr. Pratik Shom, who has been very, very patiently listening to this. Pratik, do you feel that this is the ushering in of a new era that is going to bring in that transparency that is much required in the electoral process in the country?
See, Griha, we must remember that in India, election used to witness lot of booth capturing, bogus votes, convicted criminals contesting elections and winning. What changed that? It is electoral reforms. See, there are two reform stages which happened, which India witnessed. One is pre-reform, that is pre-2000 reforms, and majorly I'll put it across that one of the very important reform which came is lowering of voting age. That is the 61st amendment which came in the constitution from 21 to 18. Then the other one is which sees this booth capturing thing is introduction of electronic voting machines. It was introduced in 1998. And that came through election reform only. Then there was a disqualification which came pre-2000 era, that the convicted criminals in National Honours Act 1971 cannot contest elections. Now we come to post-2000 era. The very important thing which came is the ceiling on the election expenditure. As far as I remember, in Lok Sabha elections, that came to be 50 to 70 lakh, and in the state assembly elections, that is around 28 lakhs. Then the restriction on exit polls. Now we know that the elections happen in a phased manner. Till the time the final phase gets over, then only exit polls can happen. So these all things are bringing transparency. I am really surprised and shocked that why opposition is opposing such reforms which is bringing transparency. Why they are opposing? Because they know that freebies which they are announcing is, to me, it is just to buy votes.
Okay, we'll come back to the freebies part of it. You mentioned about the tainted candidates who are contesting.
No, Griha,
that hasn't really stopped.
Yes.
I would like Mr. Tom Vadakkan to take that. The fact that the 1951 RP Act did not disallow these very people with a tainted background from contesting, that is one proposal that has been key. And the BJP, of course, Mr. Vadakkan, has been targeted time and again because of various netas who have had these troubled background when it comes to the legalities. How do you take that?
Well, the objective is to filter down and to create that transparency and ensure that we have a clean political lawmaker. Now that exercise is already on. the Bharatiya Janata Party or the Congress Party or whichever party, they have a system of some filing of some affidavit, but that is not enough. There must be a system where there could be action taken against such elements if they have hidden information. So when they file an affidavit, they don't file all the information that is in public domain. So then if this information comes out, then there is a process of litigation, and that process drags on. Now there has to be a time-bound mechanism to ensure that, well, if a person is hidden information which is making him liable, he should be removed from his position. And that law is also part. I don't think any political party which believes in transparency and honesty would object to a fact that you have a man with a criminal background hiding out many of his cases and comes into public domain. I think it will go a long way. These kind of reforms are necessary for the good of democracy in this country.
All right. So let's get back to freebies and the funding part of it. Anshul, the fact that you wanted to respond to what Pratik Shom was saying, please go ahead.
No, I was saying that there is no question that, electoral reforms are needed. I mean, it's an organic, dynamic process. We've had them throughout when the Congress was there, lowering the voting age, for instance. Other things, the EVMs, which was mentioned earlier, it is who does it, where does it come from, and in what manner is it done? Not in the kind of opaque manner in which electoral bonds were introduced without any consultation. That is the process. The consultative process is what is essential. Now, if you talk about freebies, well, it's the BJP who should be listening, even if you agree for a moment that the Election Commission is right, because it was them, the Prime Minister, who made a promise of 15 lakh rupees that you're going to have 2 crore jobs per year or double farmers' incomes. The BJP is the most that should be listening to the idea of freebies and how duplicitous they have been. I mean, there's been no intention at all. So I really hope they've been listening to the idea that indeed if there are freebies. Now, first of all, this whole debate on freebies is a really off-putting one, because, what you call freebies in a poor country like this, one man's freebie is another man's necessity.
Right.
Gone around.
In fact, this is something that we all have to agree on, whether all the political parties will come together and come to that one consensus that they cannot go ahead and lure the voters in the name of these freebies or welfare schemes. The debate really remains about that. However, the important thing to note when it comes to these electoral reforms is that all the political parties need to rise above their immediate political gains and look at national interests. I think we all agree to that very point. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on The Right Stand. Thank you so much.